Some people need straight lines, directions to follow, equations that lead to an indisputable answer. And that's cool, but I'm a big believer that you can get a lot done if you can drive people to feel something. And that doesn't necessarily require structure. I need art. Isn't it amazing how art allows us to see ourselves in different ways? It can serve as somewhat of a reflection. It's a reminder that we don't always have to look at things so literally. The theoretical, the figurative, the abstract, all of those perspectives matter. In its highest form, art moves us to action. I remember my freshman year at Spelman. Spring semester, 2011, I was taking first year composition, my very first English class in college. I love writing, and I didn't know what to expect, except I knew Spelman was a premier educational institution, and I anticipated being challenged in new ways. I was right. It was time for us to get into our very first major assignment, an argumentative essay, and our professor kicks it off by flashing these photos up on the projector. I'm thinking to myself, this is an English course, and here we are viewing photography. These were a series of photographs called Fire Escape Collapse, taken by a Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer named Stanley Forman. As you can imagine, the class found the photographs intriguing, disturbing, upsetting. A woman and her child just barely slipping from the grasp of a firefighter and falling with the realization that this is very likely their last moments. What you don't see in these photos are that prior to their publication, the city of Boston had no mandatory requirement on fire escape inspections or renovations. Fire safety advocates had pushed for stronger regulations for years, but officials failed to take them seriously and got stuck in the back and forth of bureaucracy. The woman in the photographs, Diana Bryant, tragically died. Her 2-year-old daughter landed on top of her and survived. The photos were published and distributed to over 120 newspapers across the U.S. and internationally. These images created instant public outrage and pressure on city government, and within 24 hours, Boston officials began taking concrete action to inspect and improve fire escapes. Art is powerful. The prompt for my first English paper, my freshman year at Spelman College, was about whether or not it was right to publish people in their final moments if it led to meaningful change. This was in 2011, 1 year after Instagram launched, 9 years before the world witnessed the murder of George Floyd across social media platforms. Not through the lens of a skilled photojournalist with perspective, but through a device that gives us all the ability to be polarizing. Perhaps we should consider how this new world repositions art. It makes me wonder if photos like these would even shock audiences, or if we're too desensitized. Regardless, I think art will adapt and always have that special ability to bypass the shakiness of logic and all that clouds it, getting straight to the heart and communicating with a deeper consciousness that can't be ignored. Humanity. All right. People always talk about how Altadena is a community full of artists, and I have a very fortunate opportunity. Our curator for Ashes and Echoes has invited me up to an artist studio in Altadena who unfortunately lost his home, but miraculously kept his studio. Let's go in.
so often. That's not a hard thing. You know why? Because my eye rests.
Okay.
When I'm working on a composition, the composition and what is going on with the entirety of the composition always tells me what it wants, where I need to go, what I'm doing with it. When my eye rests, when I feel no point of tension that wasn't intentional, when the composition seems at rest, it's done. The fire, the morning after, the fires were still going. And he picked me up. I said, "You're not going to be satisfied unless you know whether the house is still standing or not." He goes, "No, I'm not." So we came up. I guess in many ways had no reason, we really shouldn't have been coming up at that point because things were still on fire. You know, things were flying through the air. The wind was still going. But the weird thing was there were no fire engines, no police, no National Guard, no officials of any sort whatsoever. I think once we saw the damage, well, it was weird because we drove up and the entire street had been burned, all of the houses that completely surround the house, all of these trees were burned out. And we looked up and we thought the house was still standing because we turned and saw the studio's position first. And then there's a wall and then the house. And so we didn't really see the house at first. We saw the studio and the studio was still standing.
So the house is over
Right
there.
there.
The house is gone. This is your studio. This looks like a house.
This is
It's
my
a house
studio.
converted to a studio.
No, this was built as a studio.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but this didn't burn. So it was kind of strange that it didn't, thank God, because it was really had a lot in. I mean, I have the majority of my work in a warehouse that's down in Pasadena. When I finish it, I usually take it there. But this series I've left up. So what I did was about 3 or 4 days later, I mean, things were still smoldering and we brought up a drone and then we did drone shots of the whole damaged area. And then I took those shots and then composed them, edited and composed them, and then printed them on canvas and then stretched them onto stretcher bars and then painted over them. So it was a pretty emotional experience. I think I painted about 13 or 14 in the series. And as I got to number 10, I think I approached it with a lot of creative energy. It was just like information I felt I had to get out, you know. But then when I got to like the 10th painting, I started really recognizing more things that I was seeing from the photographs, you know. Pieces of, you know, our home that we lived in, windows and pots and pans and things that I started to recognize that just made it really hard to continue the series, but I did. After I finished the series, then we added another layer, a digital layer to the series, which I'll show you separately on my device. But it was difficult. I had some difficulty at first because I was losing the imagery as I started to paint and I wasn't really getting what I wanted out of it. I mean, I paint transparently, but I mix opacity and transparency together, like you see in this blue painting up here. But
they were becoming too abstract, maybe. When you wanted to connect to that reality.
I wanted to connect to the reality at the same time.
It becomes too abstract, it kind of dissociates
Exactly.
itself.
And so I really just pulled from the composition what the composition was giving me. And I studied early on for a couple of years Chinese watercolor. So I thought, you know what, I got to really thin this paint down. So I thinned it way down and started painting with much more transparent paint. And then I was getting really more of what I was after. So out of that series of what you see here, there's all of these. So there's, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I think there's 13.
Walter's studio is directly behind where his home used to stand. 2 properties practically touching. Some might call it a miracle that his studio survived when his home burned to the ground. Perhaps if we let it, art can be healing. Art often doesn't get the same kind of credit as crunching numbers and leading boardrooms, but I tend to think it requires a different level of sophistication and intellect to really lean in as an artist. You've got to be brave. You've got to be unwilling to conform. It's pure. It's powerful. Art is about as close to magic as we'll get in a lifetime.